inflammatory diseases, with a particular emphasis on respiratory conditions including asthma, COPD, and lung cancer. His innovative contributions have resulted in over 650 peer-reviewed publications in leading pharmacy journals, more than 100 book chapters and 17 books and multiple consultancies and patents that bridge gap between translation research and industry applications. His leadership in the field has been globally recognized. He is listed among Australia's top 250 researchers in 2025 and 24 and ranked as #1 leading researcher in pharmacology and pharmacy 2025 and in toxicology 2024. He has numerous grants add feather to his cap and a number of participated in a number of international conferences and collaborative research programs. Today, Dr. Dua is joining us virtually from Australia to deliver an insightful talk on novel therapeutics interventions in lung diseases. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of LJIP and request you to start the talk.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me online. I'm sorry I'm unable to make it in person because I was in India just last week and Manipal in the Manipal Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, and I'll be in India actually in a 2 weeks time again. Not even a week's time, actually next week Friday I'm flying. So it was really very hard for me to make it in person in this window of time. But thank you so much for having me and having this invitation. I really appreciate. That's an absolute pleasure seeing you all virtually, and particularly my special thanks to Dr. Shah, who've been in touch with me for quite a long time, and my apologies for delays in replying you. It was just a busy, hectic time. But I'm going to share my presentation. If someone can confirm that you can see my presentation, that would be great. If you can see it in a full mode, just tell me yes and no, because I can't see anyone or anything other than my slides. Sorry, okay, it's visible, beautiful. I think because this is one of the disadvantages presenting in the online mode, that you not only just miss the excellent food which you get in a conference, but also the meeting the people in person as well. But anyway, let me start my talk. It's the very last talk of the conference, so I'm not going to make everyone sit for very, very long, but I'll try to make it as interesting as possible for everyone. So this is one of our, on the first slide, this is one of our UTS, one of the building, which is called as a building 2. We have a lot of beautiful buildings, and it's in the middle of the city of Sydney, where actually the UTS stands. So the title of my talk today is the Novel Therapeutic Interventions in Lung Diseases. I have put my title in a very broader way, rather than just in a very, very sharp or a detailed way. And the reason is because in my laboratory, I work in both the areas, in a pure pharmacology, or what we say is a molecular or cellular biology, and also on an advanced delivery system, particularly liquid crystalline nanoparticles is one of our core area, and the polymer nanoparticles containing various moieties, what we identify with the molecular mechanisms and target it onto the lung diseases. Now, I think in terms of the basic introduction about me, thank you for already giving a brief introduction. I'm from this country called Australia. I'm born and brought up back in India, but proudly call myself as an Australian Indian. I'm from this state called New South Wales. It's one of the biggest states in Australia. Not as big as Western Australia, but it is quite big. And also you might be knowing two important, quite a hallmark features in Sydney. One is called as a Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House. Now these two hallmark features are not very far from the school where I'm based at. And this is the building which I just mentioned to you on the first slide. So this is the tower building, and this is called building 2. There are a lot of buildings around in UTS campus. So from this main campus where the School of Pharmacy or Discipline of Pharmacy is, these two hallmark features of the Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they are very close. It would be hardly, say, by train, it would be 15 minutes. And then this is actually a building where the pharmacy is based at. And this building is called as a building 20. Now, if you look at these 6 levels of the class, these are where the graduate school of health is. Now, when we call it as a graduate school of health, we have all the postgraduate programs. We have master in pharmacy, we have masters in good manufacturing practice, masters in orthoptics, speech pathology, genetic counseling, and also indigenous health. Now, at the bottom of this 6 blocks building, there is a pub on the corner. So when you get a grant, you go to the pub, and when you don't get the grant, you go to this pub. This is the beauty of the Graduate School of Health, the way it is been sitting. I'm also a research leader because my research is purely all in respiratory diseases. I'm also a research leader with the Woolcock Institute, and this Woolcock Institute is one of the topmost research institutes in the Australia, or I should say in Australasia, which purely works on respiratory diseases, and it's a part of Macquarie University. I'm also a part of Hunter Medical Research Institute. This is a part of University of Newcastle. And if you see this bridge which is coming out of the building, it attaches to the John Hunter Hospital, where we get all our patient samples. So today what I'm presenting to you, a lot of the studies are done in human samples. So most of those human samples we got it from the John Hunter Hospital using the bronchoscopy. And also I'm a part of the Centenary Institute, which is a research institute and a part of both University of Sydney and the UTS. So my PhD students are quite spread across different institutes depending on the nature of the work they've been doing. Now, the most important question comes is why chronic respiratory disorders? Why someone should really work in this area? And why it is important? Whenever I go to talk in any of the conference, I usually try to, even in person, I usually try to make it as interactive as possible. But being online, I can't hear, I can't see any one of you except what I can see is a slide on my computer screen. But I'll give you some answers why chronic respiratory disorders. And then in this hall, if any one person really can change its shape and aura to their research towards respiratory diseases, the purpose of my talk is nicely done. There are a lot of factors because of which nowadays there is a very heavy trend of people diverting their research purely into chronic respiratory diseases. Now, if we really look at the graph of at the map of India, you can clearly see the more the red color, the highest is the prevalence of respiratory disorders. So you can clearly see the respiratory diseases are quite high in the northern regions of India as compared to the southern parts of India. And that is because the limit of the pollution is very high in these areas. And there are a lot of other factors, I can tell you. There's a lot of burning of fuels and also the crop and everything that can lead to an excessive pollution. And I'll show you some of the examples in a minute. And that's why increase in particular terms of the asthma and COPD, you can clearly see 45.4% of the outpatients which are usually come to the clinics, they have either asthma and COPD. I can bet there are so many people, those who are sitting here in this hall, you really don't know, you might have an asthma, but it is undiagnosed. I have asthma, it's a mild asthma. If I really go in a smoke, I really get choked for a minute. And I think it's a normal phenomenon. But you really don't know whether that asthma is of a high level or a moderate level or a low level. COPD, which is called as a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And I'm going to talk a lot around that today. And you can see in every corner of India, every rickshawala is having a cigarette. Not only that, you can see in your own house also, in your family also, there would be multiple people, those who've been taking cigarettes. But they are the first-hand smokers. But talk about the second-hand smoker, the person who is just standing next to you and inhaling that smoke. And that chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is all because of smoke. I'm not only just talking about a cigarette smoke. You can also think of a smoke which comes out of the pollution every day. That can also lead to COPD. In terms of India, India's global sales on the respiratory medications is continuously increasing. It is highly prevalent in kids as compared to even in adults. And particularly when we go in cities like Delhi, or I should say North India, coming to the winter's time, you can clearly feel that with the smoke, when it comes the fog, it causes smog. Now imagine when that smoke is there, the fog completely full of the smoke, and that smoke has a lot of particulate matter. In my research team, there are two students currently, those who are purely their project is on the environmental pollutants. There is a size of the particle which is called as a 2.5, which usually we test. Now Sigma is a company which sells those particulate matter to test. And they have collected this from one of the busy street of Hong Kong. They have refined it, we use it for the research purpose, and that's what we use in our lab. We treat the cells with those particulate matters to create the inflammation, to create exactly the same hallmark features and pathophysiological mechanisms, and then treat with various therapeutic interventions. If we really look on the sales, as I mentioned, it is almost been close 50%. So you can see that it has been increasing every day. Now this is the real statistics. If you really see the statement which is written underneath, that in a city like New Delhi, every single person lost, you lose almost 8.2 years of your life just because of the pollution. So whatever the age you have, say example 70 years, you can minus 8.2 years just because of pollution. And this is not what I have created. This is a statistics which clearly has come out of the WHO standard. The air pollution in India is getting worse, and it clearly shows it's 8 times more dangerous than what exactly the normal WHO limit is. And that is almost killing and reducing your lifespan of 8.2 years is not a small thing. Leave that. You can also see the air pollution can cut even average life of 3.5 years across the Indian map. Doesn't matter whether you sit in Gujarat, in Kerala, or anywhere else of the world, anywhere else of Indian map, your 3.5 years of the life has been cut down just because of the pollution. And as I mentioned already, that it is almost 3.5, 8 years almost equivalent to a normal person who are living in a state like the northern parts. You can clearly see, it clearly says here, northern plains residents could gain 5 years extra life or could gain over 8 years of life if you can control the pollution. Now imagine when the smoke is there, which is a combination of a smoke and fog. A pregnant woman has to go out in that environment. How the fetus or the child which the woman is incubating is going to feel. Not only that, imagine a person who is already having an asthma or a COPD or any lung cancer or any kind of respiratory condition. If they have to go in such an environment, how dreadful situation it would be for them. And at the end of the day, if we come to Australia, we have bushfires every year. When the temperature really goes high, in Australia we are full of eucalyptus trees. It easily catches fire. It not only just destroys the human and the wildlife, but it creates a hell of the smoke, which even you can see in a city like Sydney, which is always a blue sky. This is an image which has been clearly taken by one of my own colleagues from the north side of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. If you see, this is the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and this picture was taken through the one of the road which crosses through the Sydney Harbour Bridge on the north side, and you can clearly see the sky is completely full of the smoke. And not only just in Sydney, you can also talk whether it is Canada, whether it is states, everywhere the pollution is one of the problems. You talk about Singapore and Malaysia, they say the Indonesians burn the forest and all the smoke from the forest, it comes to the Singapore and the Malaysia and it causes a lot of problems. So it is a worldwide problem. It is not just restricted to India or any other country. And these are the two beautiful icons. One side is an India Gate, other side is the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Both are covered with the smoke. So these are one of the important limits which really can bring you to the problems like this. And let me show you this video. This video will give you how bad the air pollution is actually getting deadly in India.
Published by the Lancet reveals that between the year 2000 and 2019, health issues linked to air pollution from landscape fires caused over 2.5 million deaths in India. These include wildfires and human plant fires, like the burning of farm stubble. Globally, the death toll from such fires stood at 30 million in the same period. 90% of these deaths took place in low and middle income countries: India, China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, and Nigeria shoulders the heaviest burden. In India, the northern plains are severely impacted each year, especially between October and December. Farm stubble burning in states like Punjab, combined with cooler temperatures and vehicular emissions, chokes the region with toxic air. The study found that pollutants like fine particulate matter and ozone generated by these fires travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers, affecting massive populations far beyond the fire zone. According to researchers, pollution from landscape fires contributes to long-term health issues like cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. On average, 450,000 cardiovascular and 220,000 respiratory deaths globally per year are linked to such pollution. In India, annual deaths from these types of pollutions rose from 117,000 in the early 2000s to nearly 138,000 by 2019. Now, experts warn that without immediate climate action, the frequency and severity of landscape fires will increase, limiting global temperatures rising to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius could prevent 60 to 80% of this projected increase by the year 2100.
Okay, now I think looking at all these figures, what I have shown you so far, I'm sure I have convinced at least to some extent that why the respiratory diseases are important. Now, COVID has just gone and we just came out of the COVID. Luckily, we got vaccines and everything. And anyone ever heard of a normal flu? We call it as a common cold, which is called as an influenza. Now, this influenza, which I'm going to talk today, in my today's talk is all focused on influenza with asthma and COPD. It is also one of the deadly diseases. If you really look at influenza in 1918, there was almost around 1/3 of the world population was affected, which is equivalent to 500 million people with Spanish flu. And then, if you really look, every year, estimated total death was around 50 to 100 million people. Every year seasonal pandemics come, and recently we have just come out of the COVID, and it has also led to so many deaths. Any pandemics come, it easily led to the death of around 250 to 500,000 deaths. In Australia, even being a small country, you can see more than 18,000 hospitalization and more than 1,000 deaths, which is a very big figure for such a small country. And even in India, if you clearly see, just because of the flu, they have 43 million episodes of the influenza infection, due to which there have been a lot of, the susceptible conditions can become exaggerated. But there are so many limitations and, with the treatment, whatever we have at the moment with flu. The first important thing is virus has a very much ability to change its mutation very quickly. Whether it is a COVID or whether it is an influenza virus, it really mutates very quickly. And when it mutates, it's very hard to have one vaccine for everything. Every year we need a new vaccine.